It's exciting times. Your new book cover is out for book two. We talked about that last, and it's got to feel
Yeah,
great that we're almost close to the new launch for the next book already.
it is, and I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks I'll finish the rough draft of book three. So everything's churning and going forward.
All right, awesome. So our topic today is to talk about the evolution of Abby. We've talked about it. If you've been listening to the podcast, and remember the way we're putting this podcast together, this is for authors. This is for authors, writers, people who have a dream. Mitchell started from a dream to decide that he was going to do this as a not just a hobby but a business, and he created his opportunity and he does his passion, and Mitchell has gotten published. So if you're an author and you're looking at this journey, Mitchell S Karnes is going to give you this journey and a blueprint of some of the things, and we talk about everything on the podcast, but we're going to talk about the evolution of Abby. Tell us a little bit. We talked about that in podcast one or two of our first episodes, but let's go back now. It's after X amount of podcasts we've done. Let's go to it.
Okay. Um, well, the first thing is I had the idea with the name, just kind of a play off of the Beatles album, Abbey Roads. So the character became Abbey Roads. And so I knew somewhere in the line it was going to be a book called Abbey's Road with a play on that. But so started with the name, and then I started fleshing out the character, and I wanted to have someone who was vulnerable but yet strong and had somewhat of a dark past that she was hanging on to and trying to suppress. And so from there, it built out to a police officer that had a father who was a police officer and had some kind of a um, controversy in his past that was carrying on. So she was trying to break away from the name. And then from there, I decided that she was going to have to escape something. So I put her in the Army as a military police. And so she was going from a troubled past with possible criminal activity, even to being a military police. So there was a change of names to Abbey Roads, a new identity, a new person, and that whole background began to just flesh out even more and more and more. And so I ended up putting her in Guatemala as a child of a missionary, and that missionary was very harsh, was very literal in his beliefs, and his reputation was so important that he really tore down his children. And that's her past. And then, of course, as each book comes out, you get a little more of that past, a little more. And so I don't want to give all the details on that because that becomes a little spoiler. But what I wanted to say today is that every time I go, like last night, we went to a Cheesecake Factory restaurant. We had a waitress who was very animated, very entertaining. And so that character and her personalities will end up being part of another character that I do. And so I'm looking at people all the time, watching, and you take pieces of this and that. And so Abby's story became something that was close to me with some of my children who saw me and getting hurt as a pastor. So those handful of people that always trying to stop what you're doing and trying to keep you from doing things and even lashing out personally. And two of those children still aren't back into the church because of that. And so that's where I led Abby, is that her past was so harmful with her father that she didn't want anything to do with God. She didn't want anything to do with the church. And
Mm.
so we put her in that first story in Watergrave. The whole uh, murder mystery takes place in a church. So she has to go back to the one place she swore absolutely not to go.
Yeah, and that's the hard part is going back in the past and learning from that past.
Right.
And she evolved not from just this series. She evolved from another book you've written, right?
Right. And that was kind of like Abbey Road's part one or point one, whatever, however you do that.
And what was that book called?
That was Scales of Justice.
Yeah. So I
Um,
really think that people that have picked up book one should go back, and on Amazon, you can pick up Scales of Justice today. And that's a
yes.
good way to get the prequel to this whole thing. And,
Yeah. And it's a different backstory from that one, but it's still that same troubled character who identifies with an assassin and wants him to be good.
And that's the key thing is
Yeah.
want something to be good. It's really interesting, Mitchell, when we see the evolution of authors and where authors are learning to get out there and talk about things. Live streaming is one. Another place really interesting is TikTok. One of my clients is going to start doing some lives on TikTok, and it's a really become a great author community. So for people, watching live stream or Facebook, come back, comment, and say, "Hey, where's a good place for Mitchell to find a good Christian audience for his book
Mhm.
that he could sell on TikTok?" Just bringing that up because we always are going to ask our audience. We want to involve, so comment, like, share this podcast, and also make some comments about what's happening. So let's kind of delve
Mhm.
into the Abbey Roads. What do you hope this character is able to bring after the whole series is done?
Well, I'm already seeing pieces of that, and there are people who are either non-Christian or they have been hurt by the church that are really, reaching back out to me, and they identify with Abby. They haven't seen the whole story arc yet, but they enjoy her dealing with her troubled past and dealing with her questions about the church and some church people that she has stereotyped the whole church by. And so, you also said something about identifying with the audience. And I love the fact that we had four versions of the next cover. And I just asked them on Facebook and asked them on my social media, which of these versions do you identify with or do you like? And so we're getting feedback, and that gets excitement as well.
Yeah, that's what we exactly wanted you to do is build that
Mhm.
audience of people back and forth talking about. And that's where TikTok becomes another great audience because you
Mhm.
want to know what your fans want. And this series is not like an ending series, right? You're going to keep going with Abby.
Right. I hope to just keep going and going, multiple books. I've contracted for six. So we know there's at least six, and hopefully there'll be about 45 more.
Has anyone done that before? One character. There has been, but they've
Yes,
gone
yes.
into different timelines. So different murders. That's going to be
Yeah.
an interesting thing.
BJ Borg does that with two different characters. And so the, I guess he's called Captain Wolf, but he does that with his series, and that's the Not Forgotten and Not Forsaken. He does those. But he carries that same character throughout. And I like those because you get to see that person's life develop as well as see the mysteries each time.
And you just gotta, and then it's interesting. What tips do you want to give to authors? Because I told you this is one thing I hope that people come to Mitchell S. Karnes
Mhm.
podcast, and if they're listening to my show, because I try to give as much advice for authors. This has been a journey. It's not an easy thing to finally get to this phase, and how many years in the making to now making a series to selling books where it wasn't
Right.
easy to sell books when you first started. What encouragement should you give authors when they just look at their KDP and see no sales?
Keep at it. Just keep at it. And you've got to get over the fear of promoting yourself. That's one reason I got you, because that's so hard for me to do. But you do so well in the marketing and the promotion of that, where I can focus on my writing and then do these podcasts as well. But you've just got to stick with it, and you've got to believe not only in yourself but in your product.
I love that advice because they got to keep going. And the thing is, you got to keep writing. So, for example, I look at it and as an entrepreneur has to keep going, an author has to keep going. And if I look back 15 years ago, when I was doing a radio show in my basement with a telephone,
Mhm.
the evolution
Yeah,
has definitely come on from Blog Talk Radio. That's no more. I can't wait till it doesn't show up on Google anymore. But all these episodes that I've done, and then the same thing of writing. You got to keep doing what you love, and if you're good at it, then you keep going
yeah, and
because
be true to yourself. Don't try to be someone else. You can read. You need to read constantly, but don't try to be the next so and so. Be you.
right. If you're not yourself, you're not
Right.
anything. And I think that's the advice that Mitchell tries to bring to the table is he's really putting the passion into his writing, but it's been a journey, not this overnight success. Don't think you've written your first book and get any sales. So Mitchell, your first book, when it first came out, no sales, right? Hardly.
No, I had to sell them myself. And so I bought boxes of it and just, started selling to friends and the
And I
family.
think that's the best advice for your first book is use it as a way to get people to know you're writing. And then when
Mhm.
they're intrigued, when you put your next book out, it's going to be very easy for them to go buy it. You got to be the hustler.
You
And then at
do.
one
You do.
And I hear this all the time talking to New York Times best-selling authors. So I hope someday we're going to hear New York Times best-selling author Mitchell S. Karnes. That can
That,
happen. We just
that'd be a dream. Yeah.
and that will happen with the movie, right?
Mhm.
And so I appreciate it again, Mitchell. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks.
That was a special simulcast of Neil Haley